What's up guys, hope you're all having a good weekend. So a lot of you have talked to me about some of the other systems that have come out in the past couple months and some that are coming out soon. And the reason you guys are bringing these up to me is because they are good examples of what we could expect from the Switch and some things that we can learn about them that would tell us things about the Switch. For example, these systems are handheld units that are supposed to be bringing desktop grade graphics to the portable generation, which is interesting, mostly because these companies that are doing them are running through like Indiegogo and Kickstarter, so they are looking to bring a solid system to the consumer. And there's a couple of them. Today I want to talk about a certain one, and then over the next couple days I'll probably talk about more of them. I'll probably call the series something like Nintendo Switch Cousins or something like that, but you can look out for them. Today, though, I want to talk about the most popular one. And the reason it's the most popular one is because it's actually out on the marketplace. The others that I have to talk about are still kind of in development, kind of theoretical. Not really sure when they'll be out, but the one I want to talk about today is called the GPD Win. Now, you may have heard of the GPD Win. It actually had a really strong outing on Indiegogo, and it actually pushed along enough money to where they could actually not only produce the units, but they actually upgraded them too. They did things like upgrade the GPU and the CPU. The CPU and GPU in this are one piece, and things like that. So they actually raised plenty of money and decided to just go along with it and upgrade it and then push it out to consumers. So at this point, we can actually buy the system. You can actually go on like a website, I have to look at which ones they are. I know there's a couple of them out there, and actually just buy the entire unit now without having to go through the Indiegogo or the Kickstarter campaign. And it's an interesting system, it is. It's actually like a mini laptop, essentially. And we're gonna go through the specs right now and see exactly how it may measure up to the Switch. So I'll put the specs up here so you guys can see them. And right away, you'll see that it has an Intel Atom X7 Z8750 processor. Now that's an x86 processor. It's designed to go in smaller devices like these. And what's interesting is not only is it a quad core, but it also does 64-bit instruction set. So it's a 64-bit processor that can basically boost up to 2.5 gigahertz. That's pretty quick. And then it can downclock to 1.6. Again, that's how x86 tries to save battery, by dropping the frequency down to like a low frequency when not really needed. And that does help to save battery. It's not really like ARM where they can switch to different processors completely that save a ton of battery, but still good enough. The RAM, it's 4 gigs of RAM. It's DDR3, it's low power at 1600. Now this RAM needs to be used for the GPU as well. The GPU will pull from this RAM in order to do things like render graphics and stuff. And when you have DDR3 RAM being attached to the GPU, it's harder to render at higher resolutions. That's why GDDR5 is used so frequently with video cards, because it helps essentially to render larger visual resolutions, essentially. Going down from there, it does use 64 gigs of onboard eMMC RAM. And what that is, it's basically onboard storage. It's ROM basically that you use to save your game, save the operating system, stuff like that. It does also have an SD card slot that will give you extra space as well. Down from there, the display is a 5.5-inch capacitive panel multi-touch support screen. Very similar to what we're expecting from the Switch in terms of it being a multi-touch screen. Of course, the Switch screen is going to be bigger than this one. This one does support 16:9 widescreen, and it has a resolution of 1280 by 720. Using Corning Gorilla Glass 3, which is good because it's a little stronger, resistance to scratches, things like that. I like that. Going down from there, the CPU is paired with an onboard GPU. It is using the HD Graphics 405. I believe that's codenamed Iris. Don't quote me, I believe it's Iris. And that's basically going to use, like I said, that shared memory. It's going to use the memory pool of that 4 gigs of low power DDR3 to help it along. And that low power DDR3 is probably what's hurting it. If they had gone to DDR4, it might have helped them in terms of resolution, and I think the DDR3 may hurt them a little bit, but of course, guys, they're only rendering on a 720p display when in handheld mode. If you look here at the different ports on the back, you'll see it has a USB Type-C 3.0, which makes a lot of sense. Type-A USB 3, which basically means that you can plug in like a keyboard or a mouse to it. HDMI Type-C, which is basically an HDMI, it's a smaller version that is then converted to it, HDMI. 3.5mm headset jack, which is good because I know a lot of things were taking them out, like the new iPhone, etc. And it is using basically a TF card, which is basically an SD card up to 128 gigabytes. I'm gonna skip past the joysticks and everything because I actually have a picture of it. I wanna show you guys that. I wanna skip right down to the battery. It's using a 6,900 milliamp hour battery. That is a big battery. Because remember, we thought the Switch was gonna use at least a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. The battery is non-removable, which makes sense. It's basically locked away inside of it. And it actually is quoting about 6 to 8 hours of battery, depending on what you're actually doing. I would say 6 hours is probably closer to if you're playing a game or something intensive. 8 hours may be used if you're watching like a movie, you're watching YouTube or video or something where things like your Wi-Fi and sound and screen brightness come into play then. So 6 to 8 hours is good though. That's really good. If the Switch came out with, like I said, 5 hours, that's good. So we kind of have a benchmark here of where the Switch needs to be with its battery. So here's another graphic kind of talking about the battery more in depth. It has 80 hours of music playtime, 8 hours of online video, which is what I was thinking, you know, YouTube, 6 to 8 hours of online games, and then 672 hours of standby time, which is really good. That means like if it is closed and it's asleep, it's gonna get you a long time, which is awesome because if the Switch comes out, has a decent battery, and it's in sleep mode that would still be able to use things like Street Pass, you'd be able to go days and days, you'd be able to go like weeks with it in sleep mode, still with the ability to use Street Pass, which is really cool because then you basically have no excuse not to have it in sleep mode. It'll just never die, obviously, in there, because eventually you'll get to a wall that you can charge from. So we would all be able to walk around in sleep mode without much fear of it dying over days and days of time. The big question a lot of people are going to have with this device is, can it game? And actually it can. Now, playing big blockbuster games is going to be harder. You're not gonna sit there and crank Doom to the highest settings with full anti-aliasing, anisotropic filtering. You're not gonna do any of that. In fact, Doom actually plays at the lowest settings and the lowest resolution on this device because, again, guys, it is using an integrated video card, essentially. It's a GPU that's on board. It's not a separate, dedicated GPU. Now, games it can play though, it can play Street Fighter really well. In fact, there's a benchmark out there right now that shows it basically crushing Street Fighter. It gets like an A, runs right through no problem. It can play Dirt fine, and the big one that a lot of people talk about, because we saw it on the Switch, this can play Skyrim okay. It can't play it obviously at full high settings or anything, but it can play it okay. Now, if you were to compare this to the Switch, for what we're expecting the Switch to be, this device is good, but it is less powerful than the Switch by a decent margin. From what we're expecting it to be. This device is right around what a Wii U's power is supposed to be. Again, the Wii U can run games that look better than what's on here because the operating system is designed for that system. Now, again, the Wii U has less RAM than this system, but this system also has to run Windows. Windows is a RAM hog at times. Keep that in mind. It's not easy to run Windows and then launch into a game and run that if you don't have a lot of RAM. This has 4 gigs, so keep that in mind too, guys. And the big thing is the Switch, from what we're seeing, is going to have a more powerful GPU by a good margin. This 405 Iris is not a powerful GPU by any means. It is good for things like it's in this situation for power saving and stuff like that, and in small, very confined areas where you cannot get away with a lot of heat. And that's the other interesting thing about this little laptop. It actually needs an active cooling system. So inside of there is an actual fan that is spinning. And that kind of gives me a little more thought here to the Switch having active cooling in some way, a fan inside that will cool it. Because if they can get away with a fan, there's no reason that the Switch can't get away with a fan. And apparently it does well. It's not loud. It's a very small fan, and like I said, I would like to get one of these to open it up and look at it, but finding one isn't the easiest thing in the world. You can't go on like Walmart or Target or anything like that to get it, and it's not cheap, which is what we're gonna get into real quick, because the Switch has a price point that we're hoping of anywhere from $250 to $300. This system is actually about $330. Keep in mind, it's coming from a smaller group of people who are manufacturing it. It's not a big company like a Nintendo and a Nvidia company pairing together to make this system. This is made by a small group of people out of China. So they can't just lose money on this. They have to make money on it. Otherwise, what was the point in them doing it? It's $330. And that tells me that the Switch will probably be around $300. And the only reason they can get it out of $300 is because they have the help of Nvidia these custom chips for the system. And it will be more powerful than this laptop, I can tell you now, if nothing else than because it's running its own OS that's going to take advantage of every every little bit of power from the Switch will be taken advantage of, and that will provide better visuals for Skyrim. It'll probably run better, and I think it's going to come out and it's going to crush the GPD Win no problem. But GPD Win is here now. We don't have to wait for it. You can go out and get it now if you want. And honestly, if I was going to go buy a laptop that I knew I was going to be walking around a lot with, I would probably buy a GPD Win, only because it will do things like office tasks no problem. It hooks up to a TV. You can plug it into a TV and you'll get 1080p resolution. So if you're traveling a lot, you can take that with you to a hotel, plug it into a TV, and you have a full workstation there essentially. I mean, it's a little guy. You can also, use it in bed. It has magnifying, so if you think the screen's too small, it'll magnify it up. And it's not a bad little device. $330 might be a little pricey considering you can get something like a really nice tablet with that, or you can get a very bare bones laptop with that. But the GPD Win would be much easier to carry around if you want to break it out on like a bus or when you're flying in an airplane. I don't see why that would be a problem. But keep in mind though, the Switch is coming. It's going to be more powerful. It just won't have all the functionality that this system has, with Windows obviously being a part of it, a keyboard being a part of it. And honestly, the controls, I like the joysticks on there. The buttons look nice, and I like that full QWERTY keyboard. That's really cool. So it's going to come down to what you want it for. If you want a laptop that's cheap, GPD Win might be your thing because you can do some games on it. But I'm excited for the Switch. Like I said, looking at this, I just hope that Nintendo takes away the battery situation from this. They need a big battery, and then they can really, really make the Switch awesome. But I'm worried they're going to try to save money by putting a smaller battery in there. But let me know what you guys think of the GPD Win. There's a couple other ones I want to go over. There's one that's not out yet I thought we'd look at, but there's a couple others that were shown at different trade shows and things like that. So keep an eye on the series if you're interested in things we can compare the Switch to. And make sure you subscribe and like and comment. Let me know what you guys think of the GPD Win, and I will see you guys next time.